Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Wednesday. It's July 6th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And I thought I'd start out by showing you the daily chart, just to kind of give you an idea what I was talking about in the mid-morning chart this morning when I said that I thought prices would probably attempt to trade higher. This morning we were actually trading down. Uh, I would say that it looked similar to this, except the green part was all red. So in other words, we were probably trading down about halfway down this lower stem here. Let me zoom that in. And it looked kind of bearish, but you could see we were making a higher low when we were pushing higher. And my opinion was we were probably going to trade higher before the day was over, which we did. We sold off a good bit of that. So for the most part, you can see that's a range type day. You can see we traded lower, we traded higher, but we opened and closed somewhere in the middle. That's generally going to look like a range day on the 2000 tick chart. So that's kind of what I was expecting and called for today, and that's pretty much what we got. I would expect that prices are still headed to this upper trend line. Now we may only be able to go sideways to get there. We may trend downward to get there. I'm just not sure. But you can see we still found resistance at this midline. This is a midline here, just like a midline on any of our channels or whatever. Even though this is slightly different, it's still a midline. It still works off of 21. It's a 21 bar average basically. The others are based off some other things that are proprietary, but that we've tweaked and put some different aspects into it. But anyway, my guess is prices are going to at least retest this high and at least attempt to go to the trend line here. Now, whether or not either one of them happens, it's still hard to say, but this is why I was expecting prices to maybe trend higher this morning, and you can see that in the end, that's what happened. So, and that's why I was suspecting that. So, just looking at the clues on the daily chart, if you look at this stuff enough, you'll be able to do the same thing using our tools and what we teach you here. So, anyway, let's flip over to the 2000 tick intraday chart and let's go through the trades and wrap today up. And here it is, and you can see clearly we traded most of the day inside the blue range. We broke out here early afternoon, traded up to a new high, and then prices sold every bit of that off, and we're bouncing again. Looks like we're gonna close. There's still 20 minutes left in the trading day, so it's possible we could still close inside this range, but it's looking like we're going to push higher and maybe close outside the range. I didn't look at the measured move. I don't think that's a measured move, and it's not. You can see we didn't quite get a measured move. So, and that generally leads you to believe that prices are going to sell off harder if they don't get up there, if they sell off. So we could get another leg back down, and we'll just have to see what tomorrow brings. But we are going to close higher, and we did trend higher for the day. So, but you can still see it's mostly a range day. So anyway, let's zoom in here, go through the trades, and wrap today up. And really, even at 7 o'clock this morning, this pretty much looked like a range day. And 7 o'clock comes just as we're coming down here and testing these lows. And notice we made that. Notice first you got the khaki channel. You got a break, a couple of legs down to a new low. You made a new low. You tested a previous support area. Tried to go higher. You come back and you test it again, and you get a higher low and a really bullish bar, and you're a good ways away from the EMA. I like just trying to test that to ride back to the EMA, and maybe you catch a good move here, and you might be able to ride this all the way up. So depending on how you played it, turns out to be a pretty good move. You can't enter here. You may have looked at this. I mean, to me, this looks like two legs up. So the problem is you didn't even get back to the trend line here, much less the EMA. But you could have looked at that as a failure, maybe. I didn't trade it that way and didn't mark it that way. But if you saw that and you traded it as a failure, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Of course, you run on up, and then you get a close outside here. and just kind of bouncing along, and you got a triple test right there. I don't think I would wait till this bar to go long. That bar is actually 26 ticks, but you know you got them trapped here. If it breaks higher, and you can see you had them trapped because the kite rockets on up, and it opened here and it kept going before it traded back down. So that was a really nice triple test and a trap there. And you're looking for prices to retest that high and maybe even go to the high of the range. And that's exactly what happens. We move on up. We just kind of chop higher, and you actually get a repeat pattern exactly like this. And look, once again, they trap the shorts and they run it up real fast. And then that momentum continues to carry it on up to test the highs of the range. And that was actually the overnight highs. There's a little bit of a double top there. And we went a little bit higher. And unfortunately, you just don't get a chance to really, this looks a little like a failed second entry long. And you did at least test the EMA twice. So if you took that one, that's another one. I mean, there's always going to be some that you could argue to be green if you liked them or saw something. But I'd probably skip that trade. Drops on down, and then you get a close outside. But if it breaks lower here, you get a second entry short. The problem here is the signal bar is not very good. There's some sideways action here, but you don't really have that bar with a tiny body or doji type bar. So you probably could argue for that to be a second entry. It's just the signal bar is not ideal. And of course, you make a new low and then you bounce. It looks like maybe we're going to go higher, but the expectation is that prices are going to try to test the low of the range. So, and you can see we try that multiple times and they just can't get it down there. So that's a good sign that some buying's coming in. But notice you got a double bottom here and then you get a triple test here. The problem is there's not really a bounce there, so this really almost feels like one test, but technically you could count that as a triple test, so maybe you go long right there. It's a really nice bar too, but when it comes back and tests it again, now you can say, hey, 1, 2, 3, and this breaks lower and turns up. If it goes out that other side, it's probably going to trap some shorts, and boom, look at it go. Runs up and you actually get a breakout to the upside that fails real quickly. You unfortunately don't get a chance to short that. Then you're just kind of chopping around in here in the middle. That's definitely congestion. There is a trend working higher, and but you can't enter in that congestion, and you don't want to enter right into the highs here, and then you break out, and now you've already had a close outside and a new high, and I just don't see anything here until we get back up to the highs again. Now you'd be looking to short. It's a range day, so whenever you get back up here to this previous resistance, you're going to look for a setup to short. You did have a close outside a new high, but you also had a big overshoot here. And then you try to go higher again, and it breaks higher right there and fails and gives you that big bearish bar. Look how far away we are from the EMA. I love that setup. And that's a quick, easy move. And if you take that, you probably get a runner. And you could actually ride this all the way back down to these lows here. And again, this is notice your new high and you get a first entry, second entry. So technically that's a failure, and that's a big bearish bar too that breaks higher first. So you're probably going to trap people. If you entered that on the engulfing bar, I like that better. I'm not crazy about going short right there. There's some support here and support there. And technically, this just looks like one leg down to me. So it doesn't mean you're not going to get another leg, but it's not really a failure, a failed second entry long that you could say, hey, that's a failure. But it's definitely a trap, and you can see that they had the longs all had to exit. And look at it go. I mean, that's the kind of move you want to catch. Because if you catch that and get a runner, it's probably the only trade you need for the day. And, if that's the only trade you took, you're done by 9:30. And then we're just kind of working sideways. There is a first entry, second entry right at the key entry point. Again, I marked this one green. It's not an ideal bar. It's probably closes in its lower third, but it's close. So I just, you could get a break here, and you end up getting one soon after. But you just got to be careful with those. It looks too much like a doji, and you could actually argue that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 bars stacked side by side there. So anyway, got to be careful with that. And then this is just too congested. We are working higher here, but there's no real direction here. You're just kind of chopping around. This stuff is dangerous. Don't try to trade this. I don't see anything. Maybe right here. If this would have broke higher and given you a second entry, uh, I would like that trade, but it doesn't break higher, so it's still part of the first entry. You might argue there's a second entry right there because it does make a higher low, but the signal bar wouldn't count regardless, and it's an inside bar, and you got to be careful with those. So again, you're just kind of chopping sideways until finally you make a new low. You get a first entry, you come back to the trend line, you get a second entry, and that confirms that trend line. So that's a good setup right there. I like that one. It takes it a minute to take on off, but that's why we put our safety stop one tick above the signal bar, because you're safe there, and then you can just ride this all the way to the other side. And that's a quick, easy move. And there's actually a little short-term trend there, looks like so. And you get a break with two legs, a new low, and then you bounce again. Perfect price action, really. And then you're working up, you get a first entry, and there's a second entry short right there. And it does break higher first. If you took that, you probably end up with a loser here. The problem is you don't get a new high there. It just kind of makes a little double top, 2-bar matching high. So I would wait and then notice it finally makes a new high here and turns down. Look how bearish that is. That's the much better place to go short. And then you get another lower high here. So if you didn't go enter here, definitely enter here, and you can see now it takes on off. That's the thing here. The idea, prices are going lower, but you got to be careful that you don't enter too early. And if this was all the way to the right side, I mean, you can see that's just not a good place to go short yet. And then you get the next bar, and it makes a lower high, so you can't really trade it. And then we're bouncing, and then you get your new high and higher, and look how bearish. Now that looks like we're going lower now, which we do. It makes one more little bounce, but it does end up going lower. And this thing runs all the way back to the other side, so we'll probably head back to the top side of the channel now. And you actually come up here and you get a first entry. You come back first, and you get a second entry here, but the signal bar is no good. And, by following the rules, you probably would have gotten a scalp out of that anyway, but if you didn't, assuming you didn't, notice if you follow the rules and you don't enter on that bad signal bar, prices still go higher there. And you're just kind of chopping along. There's a lower high here that you might take because you can clearly see we should be going to make a new low to test the lows on this khaki or yellow color channel. But we're definitely going sideways here. If you took this one, I'll mark it green. But if you just wait a few minutes, notice you got a high there and you test it once and you test it twice. And this is also a first entry, second entry. We're not looking for second entries here, but if you get one, don't ignore it. And it ends up just kind of chopping sideways. Notice that nobody there, and then a bar, and then a bar. I'd be real careful about going short there. It would have worked, but that's what you got to be careful of. And of course we bounce, and we actually make higher highs and higher lows here. There's another second entry right there, but I don't think you want to go short yet because there is a possibility you got this trend line. You should have drawn that. And you don't want to go long into this resistance here either. So you just kind of got to sit tight, and you don't really get a chance to take this move up here. And then again, you're just chopping sideways. And look at all the dojis and sideways stuff. This stuff is real dangerous unless you get a really good signal bar. And I just don't see. Actually, let me back up here. The blue is the FOMC meeting minutes that came out at 1 o'clock. So this is not quite the same as FOMC rate announcement. You still should pay attention to it. So I would probably be flat at least by 12:30 or so. And then I'd wait for this to settle down. And pretty much by the time it breaks out of here and it's coming back down, I mean, you might argue this is still a little volatile here. But most of your volatility and fake outs came right in here, and this was pretty clear. And this shows you even during a news announcement, the price action still holds true. Notice you got to overshoot, you come down, that leads to a break, and eventually that runs to a new high, and then we just kind of chop sideways for a while. But yeah, I would have set this out and been flat. And maybe you go till, maybe you even take this whole thing in right here. But I saw this as, notice you got a new low here, and you get a first entry, second entry, and look how far you are away from the EMA. And they almost always take the news right back, which it did. Then you get a reversal right here. That does look like two legs down to me. So you might take that reversal. And we do get the break, and we try to rally, and we just kind of chop sideways again. I don't see anything in here that would there is a second entry short right here, but we're looking for a new high, and this looks a lot like congestion and stuff here. So I would just sit tight. This is one of these where you just really, it's kind of hard to know what prices are going to do. You know what you're expecting, but it's not looking like that's going to happen. And then look what happens. Suddenly it just reverses and boom, it's gone. And I don't see any way to get in this safely until right here when you get a new high first entry, and you come back here and you get a second entry right at the EMA, right at the breakout up here again. I like going long there. There's a high or low right here, but that bar is just too big. It's not an engulfing bar, so you really pretty much have to wait for that to close, and it's just too big a bar. And then you're chopping sideways. You get a close outside, new high, and then you get a two-legged correction here. So remember the rule on that. A lot of times that will be the center of your pattern. So you measure this leg and look for a possible measured move on the other that matches it. But again, we didn't get one, anything like it. We didn't even get one for the range. So that's a clue that we're probably going to trade off pretty strongly when you can see we did. But that pretty much, that last move up takes you into the 2:30 hour. There's a failure right here, but it's too congested. It closes below the EMA. First entry, there's a second entry right there, but this signal bar doesn't qualify. There's just no entry there. Nothing that I see that would interest me anyway. And we still haven't closed, but it doesn't look like we're going to get any more movement today. There's about 5 more minutes in the day. So there it is, mostly sideways stuff. We did have this nice breakout here that eventually failed, like they almost always do, and then we just kind of chopped weekly higher there. Looks like we're going to continue to do that, and looks like we're just kind of stuck going sideways into the close. So anyway, that's the way I saw it today. So we'll come back tomorrow, wrap up our week. Another short week due to the July 4th holiday, so seems like a Monday almost today, and it's Wednesday. So of course I've been busy trying to catch up, but I'm pretty much caught up now. So hopefully I'm back to normal here. But I'll be back again to do it tomorrow. We'll see you then. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.